So I just want to talk about a few things really that I'm prepping and getting ready for this weekend's fishing. So it's Thursday now, and I've been doing some prep each day since Monday. So Monday I sort of had a bit of a cleaning day. I'm cleaning down side trays, I'm doing things like that. But generally speaking, I try and do a little bit each night, Monday to Friday, to get ready for that weekend. So this weekend I'm out on the Golden Rod on Saturday. That's on Patsell Park. That's a feeder only match. And then on Sunday I'm on Stow Pool on a teams of four match, a small teams of four match that we're running on there on Sunday. So I've set up a few different rods, 3 in total. One of those is this Matrix Horizon XS Slim rod. These are rods that I'm actually really fond of at the moment. So on that rod, this example's a 11'6" XS Slim, and in this one I've got a 1 ounce tip. That seems to be about perfect really for what I want, particularly on Patsell. And I've set 2 rods like this up for Saturday. One of these has got a feeder set up for a cage feeder, and then the other one has got a method feeder set up. Although the method feeder is not something I really fish on Patsell very often, it is something that can work, so it's nice to have that in your armoury should you need it. And on both of those rods I've got a 4000 TDR reel. These are the new TDR 4012s. They're a beautiful reel, absolutely stunning reel. Hopefully you can see that quite well there. What I like to do with my rods is after every single session I like to strip them down, take the reels off, strip the reels down, and by that I mean take off the spool, clean the reel, and then re-grease the whole thing, cleaning it all down just to make sure that it's all running nice and smoothly. And that's something I do after every single session. I think it's really important just to get any of that groundbait that's been left on there off the reel, and just get it running nice and smooth, just like it is when it's new. And it also helps prolong the life of your reels really, and just helps to keep them in a nice condition. Also, if you ever feel like selling a reel on, it's nice to know that the next person is going to be buying a nice clean, nice good, well looked after reel. I also like to change my shock leaders. So the general feeder setup for me is to use a 10-pound Matrix Submerge braid, and I use that with an 8-pound Daiwa Sensor Z shock leader. Sensor Z, I've used many different shock leaders, and there's only really if I'm chucking large distances then I'll look at something else like a purpose-made shock leader line, which I can show you as well. But the Sensor Z for me, that's a good all-purpose line. I really like that. It's really reliable, and you can buy big bulk spools of Sensor Z from Daiwa, which is really quite a reasonable price, and it lasts an awful long time compared to purpose-made shock leader line. So that's really nice, I think. On top of that, I have made up a distance rod. This will probably be for Sunday for me. So for Sunday on Stow Pool, I might potentially chuck to the middle of the lake, which is around about 50 metres or something like that. So for that reason, I've set up an Aventus 12-foot distance rod, and this is with a Castism reel, again with a 10-pound Matrix Submerge braid, and in this case I've got a purpose-made shock leader line on. So in this case I've actually used Guru Shield, and that's in a 10-pound, and that the price is on the back, so that retails at $5.99, and I can get quite a few shock leaders out of that. So there's 100 metres on that. So that gives me enough shock leader to last me quite a while. So that rod's there set up, ready for Sunday. It just makes casting to the middle of the lake very easy for me. In this particular rod I've got a 1.5 ounce tip as opposed to a 1 ounce tip, just allowing me to get that little bit of extra distance that little bit easier. And just to show you my feeder setup, so I like to keep my feeder rig very, very simple, and I've used pretty much every feeder link on the market that I can find, and I find that actually not using a feeder link much less problematic. So I just use a quick change swivel like this one, so hopefully you can see that, and then just behind that I have a stot, and then I've got a twizzle boom of about 3 to 4 inches, then a loop, and on the end of that loop I've got a quick change matrix swivel. So that's got a rubber sheath on, which you can slide back, hook your hook length on, and then close the sheath again to close down on your hook length. And I find that to be the most trouble-free feeder rig about. I don't get any problems with tangles, I don't get any problems with twizzle ups of the hook length, because I've got that swivel and that sheath. That keeps everything nice and straight and tidy, and it also allows the hook length to spin, taking any spin out of the hook length altogether. So that's a nice trouble-free feeder setup, and like I say, I'm confident with that, chucking really anything up to 80 metres plus with that rig, and I'm confident that it won't twizzle up on me or let me down. So that's my distance setup for this weekend. On top of that, I've actually been making up some hook lengths for this weekend. So I keep this little tray of hook lengths in my box drawer, in my seat box, and in this little tray I've got everything from a size 10 down to a size 20, and from 1/2 metre to 1 metre hook lengths, and that pretty much for me, that covers all my fishing. I mean, you can see on here 14s is a much more common size for me. I like to use a reasonable size hook. I think you hook more fish, I think you have less problems, especially with these bigger bream and skimmers. So I use the 14 B560. The B560 pattern is my common pattern, and I think that those are, big claim, but the best silverfish hook ever made, particularly for feeder fishing. I think they're fantastic hooks. They never let me down. I've never had one break. They're a relatively fine wire gauge, but I like them. They're a nice light hook. They've got a nice big wide gape on them, and they're just a really good hook for feeder fishing. So I think I've made about 100 hook lengths up this week. Obviously they're not for this weekend, but it's allowed me just to replenish my stocks, and that's been quite nice to know now that I can go into the weekend and not worry about running out of hook lengths. I think I'd got down to about 10 hook lengths on the one spool, and that's not really good enough for me. And then I actually keep hook lengths in general. I keep in these bigger cases, so I keep these at home, and in this I can fit many more hook lengths in. So in this one there's 24 spools, and I can actually fit 750 hook lengths into that, and that just allows me to keep a much bigger stock of hook lengths in the garage, although I still like to make the odd 50 or 100 up whenever I can, and I actually tie those by hand, so I haven't got any gizmo hook tires or anything like that, although all of those things on the market, I've seen some absolutely wonderful devices, but for me, spending £100, £200 on something to tie hook lengths, it's just not something that I've been able to do really, so I'm quite happy doing what I do. I've managed to tie a lot of hook lengths up anyway. So I've also got I've been going through a feeder selection, so some feeder choices for this weekend. So what I tend to do, as you can see behind me, I've got all of my feeders stored in different drawers. So if I just pull one of them out, so that's a drawer full of rocket feeders, which you can see there. All different sizes of rocket feeders there. They're all matrix rocket feeders, I think, pretty much. So what I'll do is I'll select, each time I'm going fishing, I'll select a range of feeders that I think I'm going to need on that weekend. I'll cater for weather changes as well. So literally from Monday right through to Friday, I'm checking my weather app every single day, and seeing what the weather's going to be like on the weekend. You can't always rely on that, I admit that. So I always like to carry some slightly heavier feeders or rocket feeders, things like that, just to make sure that I can cover any eventuality. So I use these Kevin Leach feeders, which are, this one's a taped up one, so I use this for baiting up. So on somewhere like Patsel, where you want to get the bait to the bottom as quickly as possible, taping up the feeder is an ideal solution for that. I also use these Browning jet feeders, so they're a good fishing feeder that gets your bait down to the bottom. They're also quite a small feeder, so they're a nice little feeder to use. And something I'm absolutely crazy about at the moment are these Preston feeders. So they are the new Preston rocket feeders. I think this one's a 40 gram, but you can see how small that is for a rocket feeder. So if I put that next to a conventional, this one's I think a Cresta feeder, if I put that next to see how small that is, which I think's awesome. I really like small feeders. I think they're really neat. It helps you refrain from putting too much bait into the swim, and encourages you to cast more regularly as well. And these fly so true and straight. I think Preston have done a fantastic job on this feeder. They've also made these little tapers either side of the bottom of the feeder, just to allow you to push the bait and make sure that you're not pushing the bait out the bottom of the feeder when you're filling it up. And I think they're an awesome little bit of kit, they are. On top of them, I carry things like window feeders, right down to an old traditional Drennan tube feeder, which for me is a feeder that's just stood the test of time. That really has got its uses for me, that feeder has. And then I've got the new Preston window feeders, which are fantastic as well. Window feeders are awesome for casting distance and accuracy. Going back for these Drennan tube feeders, so if I've got fish that I think are feeding off the deck, sometimes these feeders, just because they sink that little bit slower and on their side and your hook length kicks out and things like that, I think sometimes you can get bites on the drop with these that I can't seem to achieve with any other feeder. So I think they're an awesome little feeder to carry, particularly like this weight, which is 16 gram, so that goes down really slowly. And sometimes if they're really having it, you can cast it out empty and still get a bite. In fact, casting it out empty makes it sink even slower again and helps you get a bite even more quickly. So sometimes they're a really good feeder to carry. So I'll go through and look at my feeders, have a look at what I want for the weekend, and I'll set them up. And that's sort of a process that goes on through the week of what I feel like fishing. On top of that is bait. So I've ordered some bait for tomorrow from Ian's Fishing Tackle shop that I always use for bait, because I think it's some of the best bait, certainly in the Midlands, that I've come across. And their worms are fantastic, their casters are out of this world. They also use Lanes of Coventry for a lot of their maggots and things like that, so really happy with their bait. But I've also got some bait left over from last week. So just as an example of that, I've got a pint of casters here, which I'm quite happy that those are nice. Those are fresh enough for this weekend as well. So what I like to do with casters, you get something on them called bag burn, which you may be able to see just a little bit there. What I like to do is just take the bag out and just give the bag a bit of a rub every couple of days, and that just helps reduce the amount of bag burn that you get on casters, and keep them a little bit fresher. So that's a nice little tip there. And then I put them back into the fridge then, ready for the weekend. And when I take them out on Saturday or Sunday, they'll go straight into some water and they'll be perfect for fishing. On top of that, I've got Pinkies, I've got dead maggots, all kept just in the bags with the air out. I tend to use Pinkies and maggots dead anyway, although Pinkies will come back to life even with the air. If the air's been out of the bag for a bit of time, sometimes they'll come back to life. They're quite resilient, Pinkies are. I've also got some worms from last week, so I've got 1.5 kilos probably there of worms left over from last week. I have ordered another kilo this week, but to be honest I'm probably not going to need it. So they're perfectly fine from last week. I mean, you can smell with worms. If you just take a smell of the bag, you'll know straight away if they're not right. So yeah, that's again kept in the fridge throughout the summer, and in the winter, to be honest, they can go on the garage floor most of the time for me. My garage tends to stay at a decent temperature throughout the winter, and they don't really need to be in the fridge. And then another one, probably quite an interesting one for some people, is about groundbait. So a lot of people, I see it all the time, particularly on matches. People make up a lot of groundbait and they don't use it, and then they're going to throw it in the lake. For me, I use 2 different groundbaits. One I haven't got in the bag because I've only got it in a tub over there, which is Gross Gardens by Sensus, and the other one that I mix it with is Sensus Brun, which is also this is like a brazen based groundbait, which is very fine. It's good for binding, and I just like to add this. I actually use this 50-50 with Gross Gardens, which is for me a fantastic mix. It makes a lovely chocolate colour. And I keep this mix. I mean, this is quite an expensive, the same as any other ground baits, they're all quite expensive. So I keep this mix in the fridge from the week before. So last week I've mixed up quite a bit of ground bait, too much probably, and I've ended up with quite a portion left over. But that's gone straight into a food bag. I carry these large food bags everywhere with me in my tackle bag. I'll go straight into a food bag and straight into the fridge when I get home, and that's perfectly fine for a week. I'd be more than happy to use that this weekend on the Golden Rod qualifier, and I wouldn't have any problems with that at all. So for me, that's a great way to extend the life of a bit of ground bait, keep it, and just keep the costs down generally. You know, I think that it's such an expensive sport fishing is, it's important to try and control the cost of it a little bit. And also for that reason, I don't worry about mixing too much ground bait up. I know that I'm going to have enough for that session, and if I've got some left over, if the fish don't feed, or even if they do and I've still got some left over, it'll go back in the fridge. I won't have any waste, I won't have anything to worry about. So that's a nice little thing to keep costs down. So all my bait then will stay in the fridge for the week. I'll keep a check on it every couple of days, make sure it's okay, nothing's going off or anything like that. And then I'll take that all out on Saturday morning and take it fishing with me, no problem at all. I think prep wise that's probably everything I really wanted to cover. I just wanted to do a short video, just explain the sorts of things I'm doing, prepping each night, ready for a weekend's fishing. Obviously, like a lot of people out there, I work Monday to Friday, so my weekends are really important to me, and it's really important that on a Saturday morning I know I can get up, put my gear in the car, everything's ready to go, and I'm out there on a match fishing somewhere. And also my evenings then don't become too stressful on a Thursday, Friday, trying to get a lot of gear together. I've done a little bit each night, I try and do an hour. It's not always possible for everybody, I understand that, but for me it's possible to do an hour every night, so I try and do a little bit, potter around, put a few things together, and then I know come Saturday morning I'm all ready to go. And that way I tend not to miss anything, I tend not to forget anything, and I know that every time, you know, I mean, like these rods, that I know that all my gear is absolutely pristine and it's not going to let me down on the day, and I think that's the important thing. So I hope you've enjoyed this short video about prepping for matches and prepping for a weekend's fishing. I'm really quite getting into filming these YouTube videos now. I'm really enjoying it. I'm going to try and do some more natural venues in the Midlands for you, and I'm going to try and do some more editing. I'm really enjoying that, putting videos together and trying to make these venues that we spend so much of our time at look their absolute best. They're such beautiful places, and it's amazing to get great videos together for people outside the region, outside the Midlands, who, you know, maybe some people aren't as fortunate to have as many waters in their area as what we've got around in the Midlands. So it's great to be able to showcase what we've got in the Midlands, what's here, and if people want to visit, and come and fish matches with us, then you're all more than welcome. If you're enjoying the channel, please click subscribe, tell your friends about it. It's great to share the videos. I've had some wonderful feedback, and thanks very much.